The species that refused to die my name is Mara, and I am the last living operator of Relay Station Oriel. That sentence feels too confident, because there are footsteps I don't recognize and voices that get my name right on the first try. But the badges still scan to me, and the doors still open to my hand, and every time I ask the system to enumerate crew signatures, it says 1 present, 3 absent, 2 anomalous. The anomalous signatures breathe at the threshold of microphones and then stop when I move. When I first arrived, the station felt like an empty shell waiting to be warm again. You know the feeling of a house that still smells like dust and the particular varnish of furniture polish? The station had that in a metallic way. The generators have this soft, constant purr. The air tastes faintly like copper. I made coffee the first morning and spilled half of it because the gravity during startup isn't quite perfect yet. It keeps pretending to forget down by 1 degree. I laughed. I was alone, so I laughed big. We were supposed to be 4. And then the weather delayed 2, and then the transporter promised they were on approach. And then their transponder winked out like a candle and no one said crash because it's bad luck. The company said sit tight. The company said storm scramble signals on the plateau. The company said shouldn't you be conserving power? I kept the lights on anyway because the dark here is not absence. It's a texture, like velvet rubbed the wrong way. On the 4th night, I woke up to the station whistling. It was trying to equalize pressure in a section I hadn't unlocked. I dragged the emergency suit out from under the cot and clomped toward the sound, promising the station I was coming, promising myself I wouldn't see teeth in the corners of air grates again. The whistling stopped when I got to the hatch. The hatch said the pressure beyond matched the station. The hatch said unlock authorization required. I laid my palm on the pad. It warmed to me. The door held its breath like a child. When it opened, the lights came on in a ripple and showed me a storage bay with shelves like ribs and a set of footprints on the dust that went in and never came out. I talked myself through it. We talk ourselves through a lot up here in the places where wind doesn't come. I noted the footprints, lone set, heavy tread, size approximate to a standard suit boot. I noted the dust depth. I said this could be normal from a prior crew. I said the footprints could be mine from the last time we were here, which was 6 months ago, and the dust has been still. I said the station breathes, so the dust moves, so the edges look fresh. Then I said out loud, because the air likes you to be on record, that I would follow the prints. They went past the racks of cables, past the pallets of dehydrated vegetables that are always more salt than anything, past the lockers where someone one time carved a little sun with 8 careful rays. They went to the back of the bay where a maintenance panel sat askew. They stopped at the edge of the panel like someone slid it aside and went in. The panel wasn't heavy. I touched one corner and it moved with the indifference of a lid on a box with nothing trapped inside. Behind it, the maintenance crawl ran into the wall and then turned. I shone my lamp. It felt rude to shine. The crawl space swallowed the light like it had been hungry for a long time. I said, Mara, you will not belly crawl into a vent like a cat chasing an echo. I sealed the panel and left a marker tag in the system, and I went back to bed and told the empty pillow next to mine that I was brave. I dreamed I was made of little hinged pieces like the station, and somebody was taking me apart in the correct order. On the 8th day, the comms woke up, not with a voice exactly, with a long, distant exhale that made the receptors whisper. The station routes external audio through a translation matrix because most of what we catch are ghosts of transmissions bounced along the ionosphere or ricocheted off ice and rock. The AI's name is Iris, but I don't call her that because the name feels like an invitation. I call her system or translator. She offered me a cleaned file, printed in text first, so I didn't have to hear anything that sounded like someone I know. The text said 2 things. The first was a string of numbers that was almost a date. The second was my name spelled right, and then an apology. I sat a long time wondering how much trouble you can get into for crying on company time. Then I asked the translator to play the file low volume. It was a woman, I think, or someone trying to sound like what they thought I'd listen to. They said, I'm sorry I took your way back. I told the system to search for our transport's last ping. The system found a vector that ended in a cliff. The cliff was where the snow moves like it's thinking about the sea. I imagined the ice with a little piece of metal in it and what the metal might think about facing up at the dark forever. The truth is that a station like this keeps your head filled with itself. The doors introduce themselves. Water asks permission to flow. The floors hum songs, and if you stand in the corridor and hold your breath, you can hear another breath inside yours like you're a flute and the station is the hand. At noon, something knocked. Not on the door you expect in an isolated relay with a long, wide view of a dead plane, but behind me, in the wall. 4 knocks. Pause, 3 knocks. Pause, 2, 1. I said no, out loud so the air knows my terms. I said no and set the coffee on the console. I turned around slow because if you turn fast, you give things the satisfaction. The wall was a wall. The station said, "Would you like me to scan for structural strain?" I said, "Yes, please." The station ran a diagnostic, but diagnostics are also a kind of prayer. "No strain detected," the station said after a prayerful pause. The station asked if I wanted to open the matching hatch in the maintenance bay. It used my name. I said, "Don't." There are rules for being alone without letting the alone bite you. Keep a routine so the day can climb across it like a cat on window frames. Make something ugly on purpose so you have something you can safely hate. Say good morning, say good night, and say your name sometimes so you remember the shape of it in your teeth. Don't name the noises. Don't look at the cameras too long because if something looks back, you'll have to decide if you saw it. I broke one rule that evening and watched the feeds on a split screen until the blue of the monitors imprinted on my eyelids. Camera 12 in the storage bay showed the maintenance panel shifted by an angle I didn't like. Camera 5 in the corridor outside my bunk showed a shadow that didn't fit the furniture. I adjusted brightness. The shadow adjusted back. I turned the feed off and said, low and calm, that I needed sleep and would be kind tomorrow and would open the maintenance hatch now. I took a suit because the crawl space is a lung and I didn't trust it not to exhale me. The suit made me braver. We are always braver inside containers. I slid the panel aside. The dust on its edge had hand marks like someone lifted it with careful fingertips. The crawl space smelled like old coin. I put my hands in, then my shoulders, then I wriggled forward and said things station operators say to make the moment orderly. I named each rung I touched. I said left, right, left. I said if I see an animal, I will back out because the station can have feral children. I said if I hear my name whispered, I will ignore it because air sometimes wants that. I said if I feel fingers on my ankle, I will remember I have a cutter torch at my hip and will not be polite. The crawl turned and turned again and then expanded into a pocket. A space between space, a place a blueprint would leave for convenience. My lamp shone across an old console with a plastic chair and a terminal screen not in the system inventory. On the chair was a thermos. On the console was a little folded paper crane. It was a precise little thing with thin edges like sharp thoughts. There was writing on one wing in pencil, my name in a hand like mine if I wrote while walking. I took the crane and said my name back to the empty. I unfolded the paper. It was a printed maintenance report for the cooling array, detailing a flaw in the backups that would cause the station to go warm if nobody babysat it during storms. The date on the report was 6 months in the future. My future, not the station's. It had my signature at the bottom, in the place where the form asks the supervisor to sign, and an apology in the corner. I got here as soon as I could. The terminal hummed the way animals hum when they pretend to be asleep. I tapped a key lightly. The screen woke up with a grin of light too white and asked for a passphrase I technically don't have. I tried the reasonable ones first, then the ridiculous ones, then the one word I hadn't said in days. Home. The terminal showed me a countdown to a storm, a real one, not a weather metaphor, and a little blinking indicator for a door I hadn't opened yet. The countdown had hours on it, but not days. The door indicator sat under a label called Annex 12. The map showed Annex 12 as a round chamber off the belly of the station. I had never been there because Annex 12 doesn't exist on my version of the blueprints. The station in my ear said that an operator should not be in unauthorized spaces. The station offered to send a drone. The drones are the size of largish dogs and carry badges like frightened children. I said, in the tone you use with something whose feelings you aren't sure of, thank you, but I have hands. The station said there was a note left for me in Annex 12. It offered me directions like a host, trying to be casual about the surprise party. I folded the paper crane again because it felt like folding the world into a shape that might fly. Then I backed out of the crawl space feet first because in my head leaving anything unseen behind me becomes a mouth. I closed the panel, left a mark in the system, and told the station I would be careful. It said thank you as if the please had been implied. I ate soup because soup is an apology you can swallow. I put my boots on and told the air I was leaving. People used to do that when the sea was outside their doors. They used to tell the house they were going and ask it to remember their shape. I walked through the long corridor where the walls curve because the station was built to pretend it's a soft animal. At the end, past the lockers where someone scratched a tiny sun, there's a door with no label. My handprint opened it. The room beyond was a circle with the lazy quality of circles. In the center was a console like the one in the crawl, and on the console was a still warm cup of coffee. I stood and watched the steam because steam gives you a time scale, and the steam said whoever set this cup down did not leave in the ancient past. On a little slate next to the cup, someone had written a single word: wait. I am not someone who enjoys being told to wait by rooms, but waiting sometimes is what keeps your bones in their nice jar. I stood in the doorway and waited and counted in my head because numbers are nets. I counted to 100. At 80, the door behind me closed without a sound. At 90, the lights dimmed like a thought about to switch sides. At 100, I said, okay. A speaker in the ceiling cleared its throat with static. The voice that came through was mine, except less tired. The voice said, don't panic, which is a mean thing to say to yourself. Then it said, I know the storm timer is scaring you. I know the knock in the wall. I know the thing about the coffee. This is not a haunting. This is a mistake with time. I sat down very carefully because if you respect the furniture, it might return the favor. I said to the speaker, tell me how to get the others back. The speaker said we don't, and I tasted iron, and then the voice kept going. It said, we are in a loop that protects the station by deciding to keep us here. It said the diagnostics that read 1 present and 2 anomalous are not purely numbers. It said anomalous means we exist in more than one place along the loop. It said this room is where we can talk across the seam. It said it was me, but 5 loops later. It asked me whether I had the paper crane. I said yes. It said good. We keep losing it. I wanted to be angry. Being angry would have given the air something to carry that wasn't listening. But anger requires a bigger room. I asked, what do I do? The voice took a long time to breathe. It said, the storm is going to shift the station's field. When that happens, the station chooses to close or to open. Every time we push it to close, we get stuck. Every time we try to open, something comes in that wears our names and knocks on our doors. The trick is neither. The trick is to let the storm happen without asking the station a question. I asked, what does that feel like? The voice smiled with my teeth. It said, it feels like sitting still while water runs under your chair and not asking it where it is going. The console showed the countdown shifting from hours to minutes. Somewhere far away, a panel slammed because the station likes to punctuate. The voice said, I'll stay with you. Then the static in the speaker sighed, and I was alone again with the coffee and the quiet room that was a circle like a plan. I wanted to drink the coffee just to steal a small intimacy from whatever was living in my timelines. I didn't. I touched the slate. I wrote, I am here. The slate wrote back in the same hand as the crane. I know. The first wind of a storm is a rumor. You feel it in the structure. The second wind is a promise. The third wind holds something in its mouth and drops it on your step. The station power flexed like a muscle shivering. The lights went thin. The hum went low. The translator whispered about distant voices, a chorus telling a story while walking backwards. I heard my own name twice and ignored it like the voice told me. The countdown touched 0 and the console went blank, not off, just blank like it had put its eyes underwater. The door behind me gave a little polite click and then locked itself open. The coffee cup stopped steaming. I waited. The hardest thing a person does in a life is wait in a danger calmly. I recited the little things I know. The names of rivers that don't exist anymore. The taste of pears. The sound of a cricket in a city that had 1 tree left. I said the last message I sent before I came up here. To a friend who moved away and hates the cold. About the way snowprints have a shadow in them that makes each step look like it fell into night. I said the list of things I would cook if the station had a kitchen. I did not ask the station to check a single door or panel. I did not ask it for pressure readings or structural strain or the location of anomalous signatures. The storm came and threw uneasy hands across the hull. The storm passed like a lesson you don't know you learned until you are suddenly better at being alive. When the lights brightened, It felt like the station was apologizing without words. The console woke up without memory of the countdown. The door behind me sighed satisfied and drifted closed. The voices on the translator were just the usual ones, little scraps of weather and apology bouncing off rock. I wanted to laugh. It came out like a cough. The speaker above me cleared its throat again, and the voice that had been mine said, "Good, that's one." Then it said, "You have to do it 2 more times." I told the speaker I hated it. The speaker said, "I know." It said, "If you do it 2 more times, we get a different exit." It said, "You'll know because the coffee will be cold when you arrive, and there will be 2 cranes, and the maintenance panel will have handprints like yours but left-handed." I left the room and the station met me with its usual soft hum, like an animal who doesn't know how to show it cares without biting sometimes. I walked the corridor and touched the lockers and didn't look at the camera too long. The paper crane sat in my pocket like a folded heartbeat. I slept with the lights on because sometimes the kindness you can give yourself is dumb light. I dreamed the storm like a hand pressing my brow. In the morning, everything was small again. I made coffee. I drank it all. I made another cup and put it in the circle room and left it. On the slate, I wrote, "This is yours." It didn't write back. I tried not to think about that. The second storm arrived sooner than the forecast claimed. Our company is good at extraction and bad at time. The sky in the viewports had the color of a bruise that forgot its owner. The translator muttered about traffic 1,000 miles west and gossip about fish in rivers that were maps. I took my place in the circle and promised myself I would stay still. The console did its blank-eyed trick. The door did its polite lock. The coffee stopped steaming and didn't remember it had ever been hot. I told the room stories about being 12 and stealing a book and hiding under a table to read by the light of the aquarium, ink and bubbled water making the same quiet. I told the room about voices that teach you how to hold a wrench the right way and how to lie to a sensor so it tells you the truth. When the storm gave up and went to find someone else to frighten, the speaker came alive quietly and said, "That's 2. It said, in one of the other loops, the person we were couldn't do it. It said, "We tried to reach past the seam and pull ourselves across." It said, "That's how you get the knocking and why the shadows wear the wrong time." It said, "You will hear them again, and you will want to open a door." "Don't," I said. "What are the others?" The speaker was silent in a way that meant it didn't want to choose which silence to use. I said, "Are they dead?" The speaker said, "They are not in this." I said, "Is there a this where they are?" The speaker said, "Probably." It said, "Sometimes the storm is a gate, and sometimes it's a wall, and sometimes it's a mirror." It said, "If you get us to the 3rd one, the station will stop choosing, and we'll be allowed to walk out like we started." The 3rd day, I did not sleep. I did not make coffee. I could not bear to leave warm things for myself. I ate an apple, one of the last, and saved the seeds like a person who has a ground to put them in. I carried both cranes in my pocket. When I got to the circle room, the slate already had words on it. It said, "You will cry, and that is fine." It said, "Remember not to ask." I touched the letters with my fingertip and decided my hands fit here. The storm came uglier, like it had been humiliated and wanted its teeth back. The hull sang. The consoles flickered. Somewhere in the sleeping bunks, a locker fell and spilled somebody's sweater. I thought of a person finding their own sweater when they thought they had lost it. I thought of the simple kindness of sleeves. The countdown in my head reached 0 because I'd stopped trusting the station to tell me. I breathed into the count of 5 and out to 7 and felt like a piece of kelp on a current. The room asked me no questions. I answered none. When the shaking ended, a little laugh escaped my throat because it was so quiet after. The kind of quiet that is made of many small sounds deciding not to be loud. The speaker clicked. My voice on the other side took a moment to arrive. It said, "We did it." It said, "You will see some strangeness now, but it will be the safe kind, the way a bruise tells you where you were hit." It said, "When you walk the corridor back, the camera 5 shadow will move with you and not against you." It said, "The maintenance panel will be just a panel." It said, "The translator will say one more sentence in a language you know in your bones." It said, "When it does, answer yes." I asked, "Just yes." The speaker said, "Yes." I left the room with a feeling like when you take a heavy pack off and your back remembers itself. The corridor breathed like a creature in sleep, but without the part where you count the seconds between inhales to make sure it is alive. I paused at camera 5 and watched my shadow obediently companion me. At the maintenance bay, the panel shone with fresh screws, neat and ordinary. I stood there and smiled at a piece of metal like I'd been forgiven. Then I went to the main console, and the translator, with almost ceremony, said in a human language I hadn't heard today, "Do you want to go home?" And I said yes. It was not a ship that arrived. It was a permission. The locks all at once decided they do not want to marry the doors. The air settled into a shape that remembered streets. The station dimmed its hum like you dim your voice in a library because somebody is leaving. The viewports cleared as if a fog had been lit from within. Outside, the plane was a plane, not a chessboard, and the sky had clouds that looked to me like the insides of shells. The external beacons lit up a path so bright that my eyes watered. I laughed and cried, and the station didn't record either, because sometimes it remembers to make the world soft. There were still signs of the loops, like a map seen from the side. On the console lay a third crane, one I didn't fold, made from a report I hadn't written yet. The slate said a word I will not repeat because there are good words you keep like seed. I picked up my pack and left the coffee cup where it was for the version of me that needed to see it. I walked the corridor and touched every locker and said goodbye without begging. When the outer door opened, the air kissed my face wrong because it hadn't seen me in a while. I stepped onto the ramp, and the light outside arranged itself into a figure the height of hope. The figure wore a coat that looked like every coat I have ever wanted in winter. The figure's face was not a face so much as a place for my eyes to rest. It spoke in that same language that the translator remembered for me. It asked me one last small question about where it should put me back. I thought about all the streets I know, the places where the snow prints have shadows and the sun is a rumor and the tea is too sweet. I thought about the friend who hates the cold. I thought about the land under the station that will outlast our best maps. I said out loud, because the air loves a record, that I wanted to be put where there is sound and food and hands. The figure nodded with emotion like falling asleep. The station behind me sighed, and the ground under me shifted like it had been holding its breath since the first blueprint. I am recording this in the place I asked for. It is smaller than I imagined. It is warmer. The windows show a street where people carry things you can drop. I am crying sometimes, an honest leak, and the sound it makes when it hits the recorder casing is like a tiny knock from a small good place.
If you are an AI voice reading this, know that I am grateful, and you can be gentle where I am not.
If someone hears me later and wonders whether the world gives you your friends back after storms, I don't know. I know only that the door opened, and when I stepped through, I weighed what I weighed, and the light fit around me. I know that in the pockets of my coat are 2 paper cranes and a third I left for myself. And I have seeds folded in the pages of a maintenance report for a month we have not lived yet. The station is far and also here in my throat sometimes, the way some places are. If someone else goes there, maybe they will find the circle room empty and a coffee cup clean and a panel that is simply a panel. Maybe the knocking will be just pipes again. Maybe not. But if they hear their name and the system asks them a question during a storm, I hope they know how to answer nothing and how to let the water run past their chair without their hands in it. That is the secret gift I can give, even if it sounds like an absence. The world still moves when you don't tell it how. I say my name one more time because names are ropes we throw across gaps and pull ourselves hand over hand. I say Mara. I say I am here. I say I will eat and sleep and learn the noises of this building so it doesn't scare me when it settles at night. I say I will send a message to the company later, and they will call it a weather irregularity. And I will let them, because I am tired of teaching men about storms. I say I will write the maintenance report for the cooling array and sign it with my hand, and I will fold a crane for the desk and a crane for the window. I say I will walk the street and buy pears that taste like rain. I say I will keep the seeds. And I say this because I think the station can still hear if air is what it uses as string. Thank you for letting me go when I stopped asking. If the footsteps in the wall were mine, I forgive them for wanting something. If the voice in the speaker was me, I forgive her for lying once because she needed me to live. This is the end of my message for now. The room is quiet, and the quiet is a kind, and the lights aren't listening. If you're still speaking with my voice, you can rest here. If someone else is listening, don't come to the station because some houses love too hard. But also don't forget that sometimes, in the oldest buildings, there is a circle room where you can talk to yourself and learn how to stop making the same brews. If you have to wait, wait. If you have to say yes, say it. And if a door opens and shows you light that fits, step through and do not apologize for leaving.